Like a bird. For ages, that has been man's ambition. How often during the unrecorded centuries of the past he has tried and failed, we do not know. We do know that many courageous men have given their lives so that we might fly in safety and comfort. On December 17, 1903, two Americans, the Wright brothers, accomplished the first successful flights in a heavier-than-air, power-driven machine. Orville Wright became the father of aviation by making the first flight. Wilbur Wright repeated the feat a few minutes later. On the shores of the Atlantic that bleak December day, only a generation ago, 4 successful flights were made by these intrepid brothers in a machine similar to this early Wright plane. On the wind-swept sands of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, was written the opening verse of a new chapter in the history of man. But they did not rest on their laurels. The Wright brothers continued to improve and demonstrate their airplane in the United States and abroad for another 5 years before the last doubting skeptic was convinced that man had conquered the air. These early flights attracted the interest of the Army, and as a result, the world's first military air service was born. The requirements laid down by the Army for its first flying machine are interesting. To be acceptable, it was required to develop a speed of at least 36 miles per hour, remain aloft for 1 hour, carry 2 persons, and sufficient fuel for a flight of 125 miles. To be so constructed as to be readily assembled or disassembled and transported in Army wagons, and to be capable of ascent and descent in any country encountered in field service. Many bids were received, ranging in price up to $10 million for a single machine. Only the Wright brothers were awarded a contract. The delivery of the first airplane was an important event in the nation's capital. President Taft went out to Fort Myer near Washington to watch the activities. Careful preparations were made for the acceptance test. The airplane exceeded the requirements in the trial, winning for its inventors a $5,000 bonus in addition to the $25,000 contract price. 2 sled-like runners or skids supported the airplane when landing. The machine was launched from a monorail. The 25-horsepower motor whirled 2 wooden propellers by means of chains. The motor was assisted during takeoff by a catapult consisting of a falling weight connected to the airplane by a rope. The first military passenger was Lieutenant Frank Lom, shown here preparing for a flight with Orville Wright. This flying team set a new world endurance record of 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 40 seconds. Part of the Army's contract with the Wrights called for the training of 2 pilots. Lieutenant Lom was one of the 2 chosen, and a few months after this picture was taken, became one of the first 2 military men in the world to solo an Army airplane. In order to prove, as part of the acceptance test, that the airplane was useful and dependable for military missions, Orville Wright, with Lieutenant Benjamin Falloy as passenger, made the first cross-country flight. True, it was only 10 miles, from Fort Myer to Alexandria and return, but the flight marked a new highlight in progress. The airplane was practical. Yesterday's flimsy box kites had become new weapons of power. Their importance, none but the most visionary dared predict. One of the earliest and most successful competitors of the Wrights was Glenn Curtiss, who built and sold many airplanes to the Army and instructed military personnel in flying. Louis Blériot, a French aviator, contributed new ideas in airplane construction and demonstrated their success by making the first flight across the English Channel. In those early days, pilots flew close to the ground for safety. Aerial acrobatics were unknown until the famous Lincoln Beechey began thrilling thousands by his hair-raising stunts. Steadily but slowly, the Army's wings became stronger. Pin feathers grew to sturdier support. Then suddenly, war. 3 years of conflict in Europe had stimulated foreign development to top pitch, while America had crept forward at a snail's pace. The mad whirl of war caught our country unprepared in its maelstrom. Our aviation section contained but 35 pilots. There were only 55 airplanes in the Army, all of them training types, unequipped and unfit for use over the line. Mechanics and pilots were needed, thousands of them. Examining boards in all parts of the country culled out the physically and mentally unfit, selecting only those capable of holding up under the grueling grind of military training. College campuses became ground schools. Pastures and cornfields, both at home and abroad, became flying schools, teeming with prospective young American warbirds. The Curtis Jenny was accepted for flying instruction, and many hundreds were produced. But fighting pilots must have combat airplanes. Engineers were sent to Europe to study the best machines. The industry was unable to answer wartime needs, so the government took a drastic step. 30,000 soldiers were moved into the forests. The world's largest sawmill was established. The industry was organized, and this country produced quantities sufficient for not only its own needs, but the Allies as well. Much of the great task of carrying on a modern war is performed far from the sights and sounds of battle, unstimulated by the beat of struggle and without hope of glory. Almost overnight, factories turned to the production of airplanes, instruments, and accessories. America's outstanding single contribution to the World War, aside from its personnel, was the famous Liberty motor. At the outbreak of war, we had no engine suitable for combat use. Well-known motor engineers from various companies met in Washington, and contributing freely their knowledge and trade secrets, emerged with complete plans for the Liberty. In a month, the first sample had been built. Huge contracts were awarded for mass production. The new motor fulfilled the highest hopes of its designers. An unprecedented program of training was undertaken. The skies were alive, both at home and abroad, with eager young fledgling pilots, gunners, cameramen, observers, and bombers, burning with their desire to meet the enemy across the battle lines. By the end of the war, more than 150,000 aerial soldiers had been trained. Half of them were on duty over there. Due to our unpreparedness and the time necessary to design, produce, and ship airplanes in quantities, the war was nearly over before American-built machines appeared over the line. But by the time of the armistice, our production rate had reached a peak of nearly 20,000 airplanes per year. The necessity for an immediate creation of an air service, with almost nothing to start with, was bound to bring casualties, the cost of unpreparedness. Generals Patrick and Mitchell present medals to Air Service heroes. Whatever measure of success the American Air Service attained was, above all other things, due to the splendid qualities of our officer and soldier personnel. General Pershing wrote, "Our aviators have no equals in daring or fighting ability, and have left a record of courageous deeds that will ever remain a brilliant page in the annals of our Army." Following the war, thousands of pilots and great quantities of airplanes flooded the market. The Air Corps early recognized the importance of guiding these tremendous resources of men and aircraft into channels of peacetime usefulness. To this end, meager appropriations were wisely used in testing and demonstrating the possibilities of aviation by many spectacular flights. For example, the first regular airmail service in the United States was inaugurated by the Army in 1918. President and Mrs. Woodrow Wilson chatted with Major Fleet, the officer in charge of operations, before the first flight. The schedule provided daily trips between New York and Washington. With safety, efficiency, and economy as watchwords, the Air Corps flew the mail until the venture had been thoroughly established as a practical service. It was then turned over to the Post Office Department for operation by civilian flyers. Army airplanes continued in use, however, until specially designed commercial planes were available. During 4 years of forest patrol in the far west, Army pilots reported 4,000 fires, saving millions in valuable timber. 1920. What are the possibilities of flying over the snow-covered reaches of Alaska? Leading a flight of 4 DHs, Captain St. Clair Street flew 9,000 hazardous miles, proving that sledge dogs were no longer the masters of Alaskan fate. 1923. To stimulate the development of long-range flying, both military and commercial, Lieutenants Kelly and McCready made the first non-stop flight across the United States. The heavily loaded Fokker had difficulty clearing the towering Rockies. At 26 hours and 50 minutes after leaving Long Island, the transport arrived at Rockwell Field, the coffee in their thermos jugs still hot. The following year, Lieutenant Maughan made his valuable contribution to speed and distance by making the first dawn-to-dusk flight from coast to coast. Breakfast in New York. Dinner in San Francisco. From the beginning of aviation history, the outstanding aim of aviators was to achieve the longest of all cross-country flights, circumnavigation of the Earth. In 1924, the Army reached that goal in one of the most carefully planned and executed exploits of modern times. From the day the flight left Seattle, all the elements of nature banded together in their attempt to bring failure to 8 pioneers of the air and their 4 Douglas biplanes. Major Martin, commander of the flight, crashed into a mountain in the Alaskan fog. 9 days later, Martin and his mechanic reached civilization, physically exhausted. The other 3 planes, with Captain Smith leading, continued westward across the Pacific, Asia, and Europe, battling with snow, rain, excessive heat, typhoons, headwinds, and the turbulent air currents of mountain ranges and deserts. Wade was forced down in the icy Atlantic. His companions directed a Navy destroyer to his position, and he was saved. Smith and Nelson completed the world flight, arriving in Seattle 5 months and 24 days after their departure, 28,000 miles. Truly a shining landmark among brilliant achievements. At the end of the trail, Major Martin was on hand with hearty congratulations. Speed and more speed was demanded. Lieutenants Doolittle and Bettis added further laurels to their Air Corps by winning important contests with their powerful little racers. Our traditional desire to live at peace with the world was ably expressed in 1926 when 10 Air Corps officers visited the West Indies and every country of Central and South America, demonstrating the feasibility of linking the Americas by air. President Coolidge commended the trailblazers. 1927, General Patrick bid Godspeed to Lieutenants Hagenberger and Maitland before their takeoff from Oakland in a Fokker transport for Honolulu. The significance of this flight was not that they covered the greatest overseas distance ever flown, but that the instruments developed through years of research for precise navigation by stars, radio, and dead reckoning were practicable. Buffeted by shifting winds, blinded by storms, they were faced by sure death if they were 4 degrees off in their navigation. But their confidence in the equipment and skill in its use won them hard-earned success. The flying range of an airplane depends primarily on fuel capacity. Then why not refuel during flight? A tri-motored Fokker, known as the Question Mark, tested this theory early in 1929 when it took off from Rockwell Field, San Diego, for nearly a week aloft. Gasoline was fed into the tank several times daily through a 3-inch hose. Food was transferred by cable to the 5-man crew. After more than 150 hours in the air, motor trouble forced the big transport to Earth. A safe landing was made. Tired? Need a shave? Sure, and a good quiet place for a sleep. But the previous endurance record was more than double. A glorious peacetime use for a wartime weapon. These Curtiss Condors are being loaded with 100-pound bags of food for distribution to the Navajo Indians, snowbound for many weeks in the isolated country of Arizona. Indian guides show the pilots where the snow-blanketed hogans of their starving brothers are hidden. Here, an ailing motor would spell sure death. But the war against starvation of 20,000 American brothers must be won. A feast from the clouds, flour, beans, salt meat, coffee, dried fruit, sugar, 15 tons of it. The bread of life to these red men and their starving families. A tornado strikes Texas, leaving its toll of death, destruction, and injury. The Army receives a hurried call for aid. At Kelly Field, the flying ambulance is dispatched to the stricken area. Trained men gently load the seriously injured into the Mercy ship. Off she goes from the rough, muddy pastures, feeding her cargo of unfortunates to distant havens of medical aid. Another frantic appeal for peacetime use of the Army. Floods pour over vast stretches of farmland. Livestock representing the life savings of hundreds of farmers huddled together on small hilltops awaiting their doom, while their stranded owners face possible starvation or disease. Food is needed, drinking water, serum, medical supplies, blankets to stave off the grim reaper. Army bombers drop supplies and report to rescue parties by radio the positions of those in imminent danger. More lives saved. But just another day's work for these peace-loving combat crews as they turn homeward. 1934, 10 Martin bombers led by Lieutenant Colonel H.H. Arnold leave Washington, D.C. for a round-trip survey flight to Alaska. The purpose is to test the feasibility of rapidly moving a mass flight of planes to our most northern territory, accomplishing a mission, and returning home. Upon arrival in Alaska, 21,000 square miles are mapped with aerial cameras in 3 days, a record accomplished despite sub-zero weather. Arriving at the nation's capital, the airmen received from Secretary of War Dern the McAfee for their brilliant work. November 10th, 1935, the gondola is made ready. Nightfall finds 250,000 cubic feet of helium pouring into the largest balloon ever built. A score of specially built instruments will collect scientific data on cosmic rays, the spectrum of the sun, and other mysteries of the stratosphere. As the sun rises over the Black Hills of South Dakota, the order is given, cast off. And Explorer 2nd is headed for the unbelievable altitude of nearly 14 miles, where the temperature is 78 degrees below zero. 15,000 photographs taken by automatic cameras leave a permanent scientific record of conditions found aloft. Captain Anderson, left, pilot, and Captain Stevens, commander and scientific observer, right, dismantle the delicate instruments, delighted with a job well done. 1938, 6 huge flying fortresses arrive at Buenos Aires from Washington. They have come to deliver a message of friendship from the President of the United States to President-elect Roberto Ortiz. The Americans are greeted by enthusiastic Argentines. The atmosphere is charged with goodwill carried 6,000 miles from their northern neighbors in less than a day and a half. During the impressive parade, the Army planes maneuver overhead in a graceful salute. Boeing bombers designed for war, using their mighty influence for peace. At Langley Field, Virginia, 5,000 soldiers and civilians welcome the goodwill ambassadors home. January 24th, 1939, an earthquake rocks Chile. It lasts only a few minutes. But in that brief time, our southern neighbor becomes a jumbled heap of shattered homes. 25,000 dead, 40,000 injured. The Red Cross has used all available medical supplies, even those rushed by Army planes from Panama, but it's still not enough. Major Caleb V. Haynes, acting on rush orders from the President of the United States, supervises the loading of 1.5 tons of additional medical supplies into the world's largest land plane for the 5,000-mile dash to Santiago. The flight is made in 30 hours flying time, and they arrive not a minute too soon for the relief of the unfortunate victims. Then back they fly, having completed their mission of mercy. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, home of the Materiel Division of the Army Air Corps. The Materiel Division is charged with developing, procuring, issuing, and maintaining advanced aircraft, equipment, and all other accessories. The word materiel signifies every object, raw material and part, from the smallest boat to the complete airplane that is used in the Air Corps. Skillful technicians at Wright Field thoroughly test every item before it is purchased for Air Corps use. Shortly after the First World War, the Army felt the need for a long-range bomber. After thousands of hours of experimental work, this giant Barling, powered with 6 Liberties, was the result. Slow and cumbersome? Yes. But it was the daddy of the later developments that in turn fathered today's speedy dreadnoughts of the air. Today, the Army has the most formidable of bombardment airplanes in the world, equipped with every conceivable device for faster, safer, higher flying, and more deadly bombing. One of the most vital problems is to provide flyers with the correct clothing for both climate and temperature. The pilot, wearing heavy fur-lined clothing and equipped with a face mask, is ready for the coldest of weather or the highest of altitude. Giant gasoline trucks capable of transporting thousands of gallons of high-grade aviation gasoline must be able to speed to outlying aerodromes and quickly service these thirsty monsters. While flying over water, the aviator must have life rafts that can be quickly and automatically inflated, just in case his airplane changes its course toward Davy Jones' locker. Transports going from station to station with tons of cargo are met by specially designed carriers to unload the freight of these aerial trains. Another necessary gadget, the iron mule, tows the helpless aerial fortress to the flying line. In the development of aerial photography, the Materiel Division has outstanding achievements to its credit. Night photographic and spotting cameras, the production of accurate maps from aerial photographs. Air Corps photographers, using equipment developed by the Army Air Corps, have shattered world records by taking pictures from 13 miles above the Earth and recording scenes more than 300 miles from the camera's eye. Thanks to the ingenuity of engineers at Wright Field, the old and dangerous method of starting an airplane engine by pulling through the propeller has become obsolete. Here's the modern method. Just place a shotgun shell in the breech of the starter and press the button. Blam, she's off. Day after day, month after month, propellers of all types roar through their ground testing paces. Here at Wright Field, the largest propeller testing stands in the world are located. They are capable of testing the tiny little two-bladed variety or giant multi-bladed props 45 feet in diameter and at speeds in excess of 4,000 revolutions per minute. Under wartime conditions, propellers would have to be changed in the field. So the Materiel Division developed this simple derrick for removing the propeller and the carrier for returning the damaged prop to the depot for repair. Controllable pitch propellers have greatly increased the efficiency of modern aircraft. A valuable outgrowth of this development is the full feathering propeller, which can be stopped during flight. In case of motor trouble, the engine is shut off and the propeller feathered, streamlined, so that the air pressure will not keep it windmilling. Fire hazard is thus lessened, and the danger of ruining the ailing engine by continued running is eliminated. Another important advantage of feathering props is that their complete streamlining cuts down drag, thus increasing speed and efficiency. This may be vitally important to the pilot trying either to clear a high mountain range or to safely reach his destination with a limited gasoline supply. The mighty Flying Fortress cruises along easily and completely unconcerned about its safety, with 2 of its 4 motors dead. A striking example of how lives and valuable equipment are saved by modern research and development. As engine horsepower increases, propellers must be increased in size, but too long a propeller would not clear the ground during takeoffs and landings. The engineer's answer to this problem is a dual rotating propeller. In effect, 2 propellers rotating in opposite directions. Prior to flight, wings are static tested. Many thousands of pounds of sandbags are placed upon the wings to prove their strength before test pilots risk their lives with them. Landing gears must be given dynamic tests prior to actual use, and when failures occur, necessary structural changes can be made before flight. A crash, but only the airplane was consumed. No pilot was at the controls. These crash tests were made to study the cause and origin of aircraft fires. Using obsolete and condemned aircraft and taking slow-motion pictures of the test, it was learned that the fire originated at the point where the exhaust manifold was broken. Much valuable information was gained by the research department of the Materiel Division from these laboratory crashes. In the early days of flight, man flew neither sufficiently high, fast, nor far to take him beyond the elements of normal physical reaction. Today, flighttions have been stepped up far beyond previous human experience. So the Physiological Research Laboratory studies the reactions of the pilot. In this chamber, without leaving the ground, he can be taken 80,000 feet above sea level, theoretically, with temperatures down to 65 degrees below zero, while doctors study his reactions. The railroad gave us an efficient means of transporting freight, but sometimes that method isn't fast enough. Aerial transports stand ready day and night at supply depots, ready to take off at a moment's notice to rush anything from an engine to a bottle of serum to any point it may be needed quickly. One of the most remarkable developments since long-range flying became commonplace is the automatic pilot, which holds a true and set course with deadly accuracy, without a human hand on the controls. This relieves the pilots of undue fatigue and allows them to concentrate on other problems of flight. Aviation during the past few years has developed to the extent that taking off and flying blind has become a routine event. But we were still confronted with landing an airplane when the visibility is zero until the Materiel Division developed the radio-controlled airplane. Automatic flight was achieved for the first time in history on August 23, 1937 at Wright Field. Although a safety pilot sat in the cockpit, he never once touched the controls as the airplane took off, circled, and landed safely. A long step forward in the art of safe flying. Following closely on the heels of the automatic landing, the Materiel Division developed a radio-controlled target glider. Released for flight, this small airplane is amazingly controlled by a small gadget held in the hand of the operator on the ground. When the release button is pushed, or when a bullet puts the target out of commission, the parachute opens and the little plane gently floats to Earth, ready to be groomed for another flight. The first parachute pull-off ever recorded was made at the Materiel Division. Man was believed to become unconscious if he fell over 500 feet. This first delayed drop of over 1,000 feet proved the fallacy of man's opinion. The aerial life preserver has saved over 1,200 lives during these past 18 years. Bouncing out like peas from a pod, a massed aerial jump is performed. The Air Corps proved that a number of men could quickly and safely bail out if and when necessary. For many years, man has been attempting to accomplish vertical flight. This strange, weird object, the first helicopter, did successfully leave the ground, but under greatest of difficulties. The pilot and his assistants always gave a sigh of relief when the flight was completed. The helicopter, a vast and unwieldy object, finally came to grief and was abandoned. But from this idea, research and testing continued. Next, the autogyro came into existence. These are truly remarkable aircraft. The name Flying Windmill is most appropriate for such a strange aerial object. They are capable of performing the most unusual of flights. Captain Gregory of the Air Corps, a past master of the autogyro, demonstrates some of the tricks of the trade. The Materiel Division has built a tradition of progress and achievement in the development of aircraft and allied industries. Whether it be developing some microscopic instrument part or testing a speedy new pursuit plane, the goal is the same, perfection. The flight test section puts through its paces one of the most capable fighters in the world. This is the Airacuda, one of the first bimotored pursuit planes ever developed. It is a daily routine for the flight test section to give airplanes such as this O-47 every conceivable test that it is possible to give while in flight. Year in and year out, the Materiel Division forges ahead in its important job of developing and buying the best. Great have been the strides made from the old Barling bomber to such giants as the B-15 or the deadly little pursuit plane that flies alongside it. Keep America first in the air. Second best isn't good enough when two planes battle in the skies. Always striving for the elusive goal is the job of the engineers at Wright Field. Military aviation is increasing today at an unprecedented rate. The Air Corps strives to keep pace with the rest of the world. Major General Henry H. Arnold, Chief of the Air Corps, speaks.
I advise our nation to arm for air defense immediately. I urge them that all remember this. A strong Air Force may go a long way toward keeping America out of war. Also, a strong Air Force is absolutely essential to keep war out of America.
Realizing the necessity for full support, Congress appropriated money for Air Corps expansion. President Roosevelt, accompanied by General Arnold, inspects the latest equipment in order to gain a better insight to the Army's first line of defense. It's a huge task, training the necessary personnel to meet the expansion program. Young America responds with enthusiasm. Normal young Americans, these. They have had 2 or more years of college work and can successfully pass the physical requirements of the Air Corps. Specially trained flight surgeons, working at top speed to examine the thousands of applicants, give the password. You are physically qualified to start your flying training. The GHQ Air Force, combat branch of the Air Corps, adds many new squadrons to meet the new needs. Pilots are needed, and needed quickly. The Air Corps Training Center, charged with the training of embryonic pilots, is called upon to train several hundred additional officers. The challenge is met with gratifying results. Changes are to be made. The training course shortened, but the rigid training requirements must not be lowered. There will be no compromise with safety, is the watchword as the expanded pilot program gets underway. The course of 9 months is divided into 3 parts. 3 months at one of the several primary schools located at various points in the United States. Then 3 months of basic training at Randolph Field, the west point of the air, followed by 3 months of advanced training at Kelly Field, which is steeped in the traditions of the Air Corps. But with air training must go ground training, ground discipline. That's the basis for the air discipline so necessary for precision flying by the modern combat pilot. These smartly turned out flying cadets can drill as well as fly. Subjected to rigid and intensive schooling from the first ride through the memorable day of soloing until the last flight on graduation day, these cadets have been given flying training in the world. Closely supervised by their officer instructors, they are taught with infinite care and pains the art of flying in all its phases. Whether it be flying individually, cross-country, in formation, or maneuvering in aerial combat, the aerial soldier turned out by the Air Corps Training Center is second to none, and upon winning his wings, he is ready for the GHQ Air Force. Keeping a fleet of complicated modern military airplanes in readiness for operation requires skilled maintenance crews. Enlisted men are especially trained at the Air Corps Technical School. Here again, we see the Air Corps meeting the demand for trained personnel. These technical schools teach not only the maintenance of the motor and the airplane itself, but all crafts allied to the combat unit. Armament, radio, photography, welding, and a multitude of other crafts. So with the newly trained pilot and mechanics, we join the GHQ Air Force. Pursuit aviation, fighters, Airacoudas, interceptor fighters, Airacobras, sky fighters all. Tiny aircraft powered with giant motors, moving with the precision of a well-trained ballet. These pursuit groups strategically located, can, upon signal from the aircraft alert net, take off and climb at the amazing rate of 3,000 feet per minute. 15,000 feet in 5 minutes. Performance beyond belief. Reaching incredible altitudes and speeds, these skyfighters are ever on the alert, relentlessly searching and seeking for the hypothetical invader. It's all part of the peacetime training. Ready to spit venom more deadly than the Cobra from machine gun or cannon. Returning to Earth, whether from a mission that carried them thousands of miles away or thousands of feet in the air, these capable fighters once again become earthbound. And as we watch them land, we salute with pride the skyfighters of the GHQ Air Force. Bombardment aviation. It has shrunk oceans to ponds and continents to fields. These shark-faced dreadnoughts of the air, carrying thousands of tons of bombs and heavily armed with machine guns and cannon, are equally at home over land or sea. Their ability to travel thousands of miles non-stop has changed the defense plans of many nations. The GHQ Air Force, confronted with defending thousands of miles of widely separated shoreline, must and do have the most formidable bombers in the world today. Manned by highly trained crews, it makes little difference whether these giants are sent hundreds of miles to sea on a bombing mission or are speeded over the towering Rockies on a non-stop flight from coast to coast. Casting their menacing shadows, these mighty bombers sail serenely over San Francisco and point their wicked snouts toward the East Coast. Flying at speeds well over 200 miles per hour, laden with hundreds of gallons of gasoline, capable of carrying a ton of bombs and a crew of 5 to 9 men each, proud monsters pass the Rocky Mountains on their eastward dash. They need no radio beam or landmarks to guide them. Their navigators, trained to navigate by the stars, can safely steer them to their destination over ocean or uncharted wilderness. They are truly remarkable aircraft, and these short scenes, pictorially, are things of beauty. But they likewise tell the story of the ability of the pilot and the faith they have in their flying speed. It seems incredible that just a few hours ago, this squadron of bombers was far out over the Pacific. As unconcerned as a string of circus elephants, now they sail over New York City, giving the earthbound inhabitants below added confidence in the ability of the GHQ Air Force to protect our shores. The mission of these giants is to find and destroy the enemy, whether on land or sea. Fully equipped with the best accessories money can buy, no mission is too tough for these flying fortresses. Whether carrying 100-pound bombs or 2,000-pound bombs, they can attack with deadly accuracy. Light bombardment is charged with direct support of ground troops. Ground strafing, delayed bombing, gas spraying, smoke screen laying. These functions have given light bombardment a unique place in warfare, functions violently feared by all ground troops. Light bombardment, formerly called attack aviation, was developed as the result of our experience in the First World War. These little two-seaters bristle with machine guns. They are maneuverable, fast, and capable of effective operation close to the ground or at higher altitudes. Both pilot and gunner must be ever on the alert. The light bomber must be prepared to perform many types of missions, so there must be constant training. beautiful sights in peacetime, but may spell doom to enemy ground troops in time of war. Hidden in the opaque darkness, friendly troops can advance unseen to enemy positions for attack. The light bomber truly has many uses in modern aerial warfare. So we close the story of the Air Corps with its virile, mobile, fighting squadron. A fighting force that is ever watchful and ready to strike with all of its combined strength. It is an Air Corps that we can point to with pride and confidence, knowing that it can accomplish its difficult tasks effectively. We close with these symbolic scenes, unique and fantastic. Shadows, dancing shadows, gay dancing dolphins of the air that merrily skirt the sand dunes and play follow the leader, or skip from sand dune to sand dune with utter abandon. Scenes that leave an indelible impression, an impression that is reassuring during these troubled times, because we know that wings of the Army will always cast their protecting shadows over the people of these United States of America.